Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
What's going on? It's An0maly. We're hitting the street today to talk about Kanye West and his relationship with Donald Trump.
They say An0maly go post a black square. Shut the fuck up.
To themselves in a 2018 article admitted that they only measure the coastline. Some of it's melting, some of it's growing, and they can't even measure the snowfall because their satellites aren't good enough. So the fact that they say the science is settled is a made-up term. Science doesn't settle, especially on a planet where most of it's unexplored. So I don't understand why they call anybody who counters them a denier. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, y'all ain't all that. I ain't seen you a kid.
Everyone's been very kind, but I have to be honest, this is not a women's march. It is a pro-Democrat, pro-Obama, pro-Kamala Harris, pro-Cory Booker, pro-Obama, strongly anti-Trump, Planned Parenthood support group rally march. It's just not a women's march because it's only if you watch CNN and MSNBC and believe the Democrats, it's a march for women and men who do that. A lot of people are upset because he came out and said he loves Donald Trump and he's talking about love and self-manifestation. How do you feel about that?
If Kanye does it, I do it.
Knowing that they're actually going to try to force you to get it, isn't this kind of psychotic? I'm not an anti-vaxxer, just like I'm not an anti-piller if I suggest I don't want the government to force 15 pills down my throat or tell me that I have to take perhaps the most rushed pill in modern history. That doesn't make me an anti-piller. I'm not an anti-juicer because I don't like certain juices.
An0maly is a hip-hop artist and political commentator with over 600 million views and about 2 million social media followers. He's appeared on Fox News and all your favorite pages. He's managed to stay fairly consistent in his criticism of both sides of politics, and he's done it all independently. How are you doing, good sir?
Glad to be here. Thank you for the very kind intro. Appreciate it.
No problem. I think the first time I saw you was on a Fleckis video. I know we're going to show that later, but I'd like to start off with how I came across a person. You gave very good opinions. You appeared in that in his series a couple times, and ever since then, I've sort of I've agreed with you on a lot of things, and I've disagreed with you on some. And throughout, I'd say 2020 and towards 2021, I felt like that I've figured out that I do agree with your ethics, your morals, and how you see the world. So that's why I wanted to talk to you, and I like getting your opinions. And the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was your opinions on the lockdowns in your area where you're living right now. How are they right now, and do you agree or disagree with them?
I mean, I guess in comparison to Canada and places like the UK, it's not as bad, but I'm in California and I disagree with them. They're putting restrictions, although I'm in a more conservative county. So it's a little bit less, like the police don't enforce it. It's basically self-inflicted because there are businesses that are running full capacity with no problem. So yeah, I don't agree with it. And I think in June, they're going to release restrictions to some extent, but they're keeping the mask mandate and they have no timeline. They have no metrics. They don't even pretend to tell people a reason anymore. Most people don't even know that. So, you know, you got to ask yourself, if they're not even telling you when you're going to be able to take the mask off and go back to really normal, do they even have a plan to let you go back? And I don't think that they really do.
No, I'd have to agree with that. Up here, like you said, in Canada, we've just entered a new stage of lockdowns. It's a year later, more than a year later, it's somehow gotten worse. Now they're threatening the variants. There's never ever been any discussion of masks not being required at all. So I think you might have a luxury there of thinking that maybe there's an end to it. Up here, it doesn't seem like there's an end to it at all. And one of the first things I wanted to address from one of your videos is about PCR tests. Now, the lack of accuracy of them has been largely swept up under the rug, and I want to show a clip about you talking to this on a recent live stream you did. So let's go ahead and roll that, Justin.
Mass testing is the whole scheme. Asymptomatic cases, how they're testing, how many cycles. DeSantis isn't talking about it. Trump's not talking about it. Abbott's not talking about it. So my job, I feel like, as a citizen, I'm just ticked off. I'm ticked off at all the tyranny. I'm ticked off at the lockdowns, the vaccine passports on rural Caribbean. It's all just frustrating how they're treating kids, how they're treating the elderly, acting like quarantining them's healthy when it really breaks down an elderly person's body. And no Republican seems to have the balls to talk about it. So, as far as, is he better than Kamala Harris? For sure. But this is starting to feel like a Roman theater where you either get socialism, communism, and medical tyranny, or socialism, communism, medical tyranny with higher gas prices, where, yeah, I'm going to have a preference, but it's just not doing the trick for me.
Now we'll get to the two-party system, if you will, in a few minutes, but I want to ask you, why is nobody talking about this? The WHO, they came out, of course, after Biden was elected, and they echoed that the PCR tests aren't very effective. I mean, I remember I covered this last year, a New York Times study saying that only 10% of the people who tested positive in their study of, I think, 40,000 people actually had enough virus in them to make it transmittable. So why do you think nobody's talking about this on either side, really?
I can't figure it out. I mean, maybe it's the lobbying power that certain industries have in media and government. Maybe they don't know. Maybe you have to play a role to get to that powerful position. I'm not quite sure, but as a citizen, obviously I lean to one party that preserves freedom, but they're not getting to the core of the testing. And I said in March, it's like the more you test, the more you're going to find. And also, they're conflating, did you die with COVID or did you die from COVID? And they're not making that distinction. And then they're counting asymptomatic cases. And they're not doing that in China, because what's an asymptomatic case? You don't even have symptoms. And then you figure out, I have the book right here by Kerry Mullis. He is the inventor of the PCR test. Oh, sorry, I got to put it over here. He invented the PCR test, and he himself said when he was alive that you cycle in and it goes times 2 times 2 times 2, and it multiplies, I forget how many cycles, it's 1,000,000 and 1,000,000,000 times. And he said if you zoom in, it'll make you feel like a Buddhist because you believe in the notion that everything is inside of you. So he was like, it's not made to tell you whether you're sick or not. That's not what it's designed to do. So they're testing people with a PCR test, and no Republican or Democrats talking about it. So I don't think this is ever going to end until you get to the core of what's going on, and that is testing and how they're counting testing, what they're using, and using those metrics to fearmonger people into what I consider human slavery.
Now, throughout this whole lockdown and coronavirus spiel, has your support or belief in either party shifted? Has it changed into sort of regressed into towards the self, I want to say, where you don't necessarily want to believe what either side is saying? Even if you favored Republicans, let's say, before, are you still believing them in as much as you did, or have you always felt that way?
Well, in the clip you just showed, it's become the point where they're not holding the line at all. Like I said, you got socialism, communism, medical tyranny, and lower gas prices, or socialism, communism, medical tyranny with higher gas prices. So I've had an evolution, like a lot of people, waking up to what liberals really were and waking up to what the media really was doing. But I think for a while now, I've seen that the right wing isn't really doing everything they're saying. They talk a big game about free speech, but then when push comes to shove, they're more interested in passing speech bills. Or like Governor Abbott in Texas. I love Texas. It's one of the most free places in America. But Governor Abbott is lobbying some sort of thing where he's turning against Gab, which is a Christian-owned independent social media designed to really fight Facebook, Google, and Twitter with free speech. And that's where his priorities are in a lockdown. He won't talk about the testing situation and how they're testing and how that's really driving a lot of this stuff. They're not fighting that hard against corporations who hate us, who are trying to overturn voter ID, things like that. Mm-hmm. But he's willing to go after an app. So at a certain point, I'm not doing it to be edgy, or some people accuse me of, if you're not left, you're right. If you're not right, you're left. I'm not doing it to be like a libertarian fence sitter. I'm doing it because it's genuinely not enough. And I think you see that in Canada with people like, is it Rob Ford or Doug Ford? Rob Ford is there? Doug Ford. He pitched himself like this Trump character, and then he's been super pro lockdown. And same with Trump. He pitched himself as this freedom fighter, and then he in many ways kind of caved, or at least just pushed the status quo narrative for a while. So I'm not doing it for any other reason besides it's not working until enough people wake up. At what point I figured that out, I'm not quite sure. And everybody, can evolve and learn. But I think it's important for the left and the right to know that a lot of what they're doing is fighting each other, picking characters that they like. But at the end of the day, I think the liberal characters are egregious and they don't know what they're doing. And the Republican characters are doing just enough to pretend like they're doing something, but not enough to take this away. And as a person who loves America, I don't want to live in a place where they're jacking PCR tests up my nose and trying to, cycle in and see. It's like, I don't want that. And this is never going away until enough people don't comply and also understand like every which way what's happening. And you just don't see anyone getting to the core of it. I don't know why that is. And I can't really tell you when I came to that conclusion.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are noticing. I mean, maybe they don't. I'm obviously reading about politics and news every day, but when I see the leader of the federal Conservative Party here saying, "Oh, we're going to open an investigation. If you elect me, we'll open an investigation into the process of the lockdowns." It's sort of like, okay, you're saying that you want to find out why all these decisions were made, but you're not saying that you're against the lockdowns. It's all about vaccines. It's all about, trying to hold the other side accountable without actually making any stances, without actually creating any policy suggestions. You're doing everything you think is right without actually doing anything or taking any hard stances. And it's all to please like a Twitter crowd, I feel like. I feel like as long as nobody's mad at you on Twitter, they think that they're doing the right job, and that's just not the case. I would like them to actually have to be able to argue these points in public on television, but that never happens. Just like with Biden up here, we don't have any accountability from the media in terms of actually asking tough questions. It's all, why haven't you locked down more? Why aren't you giving teachers more money? So that's the sort of thing we're dealing with. So I don't want you to feel alone down there in the Southwest. I want to transition to sports activism. I noticed you've done a few videos on this, and it's something that I paid attention to a lot because I love sports, and it's turned me off a lot of sports. Besides the UFC, I can't think of any sports leagues that haven't gone completely political. And there was a recent clip from, I'm assuming Charles Barkley's in the Hall of Fame, but he had a clip talking about both sides pitting each other against one another. So let's play that clip, and I want to get your reaction to that again.
Shared that news, how painful it was.
Yeah, but the one thing I took out of that piece was, man, I think most white people and black people are great people. I really believe that in my heart. But I think our system is set up where our politicians, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, are designed to make us not like each other so they can keep their grasp of money and power. They divide and conquer. I truly believe in my heart most white people and black people are awesome people, but we're so stupid following our politicians, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. And their only job is, hey, let's make these people not like each other. We don't live in their neighborhoods. We're all got money. Let's make the whites and blacks not like each other. Let's make rich people and poor people not like each other. Let's scramble the middle class. I truly believe that in my heart.
Now that's some real talk. Divide and conquer. Keep the left and the right and the black and the white fighting so they never truly realize who the slave master in the top of the pyramid is. Props, Chuck. He's a real one. But most of the NBA pro-black race activism is super fake. They just pretend to care about black families in America, but I could tell they don't because I'm not an idiot. When I was watching the All-Star game because I love basketball, they were promoting Taco Bell and Mountain Dew because those were the sponsors. They pay them money, so that's what they do.
Now, the NBA has had a powerful social justice movement in stupidity that has caused me to stop watching it after my hometown team won the championship. You've got Mark Cuban not wanting the national anthem. You've got LeBron James fighting for this horrible voter suppression in Georgia. What's the motivation behind all this, do you think? Is it money? Does LeBron and Mark Cuban really think that there's Jim Crow-esque laws being passed in Georgia?
Some of them maybe just go along with it because that's where the money is and it's easy. Other, I think, are smarter and more devious. But honestly, in America, and I'm sure in Canada, the liberals and what we have as the Democratic Party, they control the culture and they control the NBA. So they have them saying Black Lives Matter and putting phrases on their shirts while they're selling high fructose corn syrup, fast food, insurance, pharmacy pills, anything contributing to the mass obesity, which if you look at a lot of the reports, most of the hospitalizations are obesity. Most of the countries where most of the deaths are obesity. So obviously, if you're overweight, you're more likely to die from anything. Just like if you're elderly, and you get pneumonia at 90, yeah, of course the death rate is going to be higher than if you're. It's all these like number games they're playing where they're like, well, the elderly is 95%, and you're not. That's for every disease, and it's not saying it's good, but it's like it's not worthy of lockdowns and shutting down. So their race activism is fake. They're making people fatter, sit on the couch, and they shower them with these Marxist ideas of racial activism. And I have a book here from a black communist who ended up leaving the Communist Party. It's called Color, Communism, and Common Sense by Manning Johnson. And G. Edward Griffin put me onto it, but I'm going to just read from chapter 2. It says subverting black churches. And this is almost 100 years old now. It said what the communists were doing was creating doubt, lack of confidence, suspicion, setting up situations that bring about racial bitterness, violence, and conflict, putting forth demands so unrealistic that race relations are worsening, attacking everybody in disagreement as reactionaries, fascists, and Ku Kluxers among whites and Uncle Tom among blacks. Blacks was what the communists were doing. Sorry, it was like a weird word because they had a different speech back then. But, they've been doing this for 100 years and starting these racial things. And that's exactly what they're doing now, is pitting people against each other, like Charles Barkley said, and also just making race demands that are so unrealistic and so bizarre that people hate each other. At the top of the pyramid, they're doing this purposely. At the lower level, or maybe like the LeBron level, I don't know how smart he is, or, if they're just in an echo chamber of people who agree with them, so they feel like they're really helping their race. But if they really cared, they would look at lockdowns, quarantines, 100,000 businesses and restaurants, completely wiped away while Amazon grows and they're sitting there selling Taco Bell and Mountain Dew. They're the biggest frauds. And it's really embarrassing because, the black community in America could use some real leadership, especially as they're taking away their freedom that I know them and my ancestors fought really hard to get to this country, or at least to get free in this country. So I don't know what they think they're doing, but they need to wake up.
And of course, Mountain Dew is disgusting. Now, not to make a joke, I have to make jokes about everything. I'm sorry, that's just how I am. But I've heard in a lot of your videos, you mention the fructose syrup, you mention fast food. Is the number one reason you mention that is because you think that a healthier lifestyle for a lot of people will make a lot of problems go away? And down the line from that, do you think it will take power away from corporations who may not have the best intentions for people, or just simply don't care as long as they sell their product?
It's just good to be healthy, and I don't care really what other people do, but with my platform, I like to inspire people to work out like I do and inspire people to get fit because it's better physically, mentally, you have more energy, you're less likely to die from COVID or anything else. So it's just healthy to be. But also when I really started talking about it was in March when they shut everything down. And I said in March, listen, if you're going to do anything mandatory, if they did mandatory workouts, mandatory jumping jacks, and kept all businesses open with no mask mandates, scientifically they would save more lives. But they're not in the business of saving lives. They're in the business of deceiving the public, making them fatter, stupider, addicted to pharmacy pills, begging for a jab every year, 2 years, wearing a mask, getting treated like robots on and off, up and down, left and right. You can go to the beaches, you can't go to the beaches. You got to eat indoors, you got to eat outdoors. You got to eat outdoors, indoors. And people are just walking around and following. It's like, you think these people don't care about your health? It's bizarre to me that people buy this. So I'm talking about health because most of the obese, or most of the cases of COVID in America that were hospitalizations were obese. And that's not random. They're purposely making us, or recklessly making us, fat, stupid, lazy, and addicted to pharmacy products. And this pandemic is really just all these agencies, all these industries, and all of these politicians who are wildly sold out and don't give a crap about your health, running rampant all over your constitution, your freedom, your rights, your family, your physical health, your mental health, and your psychological health. And it's disgusting that both parties seem to play into it. All they have to do, run an obesity ticker on Fox News and say, more people are dying from this, and say, listen, it's not healthy. Even the Republicans that are the freedom fighters, they say, well, we're going to quarantine the elderly. It's not healthy to quarantine the elderly. They need to move. They need to see human interaction. They're killing people. It's not you're killing grandma without a mask. The politicians, the pharmacy industry, and these lockdown fanatics on both sides are killing elderly, and they're treating kids like animals and slaves and psychologically abusing them. It's so gross what's happening, and I can't fathom why they won't talk about it, but I will.
Now, you mentioned that it's not healthy to quarantine. I personally don't know much about the health ramifications for a person not going. It seems to make sense. You need exercise, you need fresh air. Do you think that's what's causing a lot of the deaths in the long-term care homes, and can you cite anything to support that?
Well, in long-term care homes, when you're 80 to 100, it's not abnormal for people to die there because people go to those houses at the end of their life. So you'd have to look at total deaths in America, which they're now covering up and won't let you talk about because it's not bizarrely out of proportion to other years. I don't know what it's like in Canada. So this idea, like say with COVID, they say it's a whatever percentage for the elderly, and for the young it's this percentage. Find me a disease that is not like that. The elderly do not handle it better. That's not to say it's okay that they pass away, but it's just saying that it's a number manipulation game, which is why everyone should read How to Lie with Statistics, which Bill Gates recommended. The whole book's about that, using statistics and graphs to manipulate people, no matter how true it is or not. That's literally a book that Bill Gates recommended people read, and I read it, and it's quite shocking. But there are reports in the mainstream media in America of people dying because of loneliness. And I do have reports out of Italy. They had this one area where elderly people lived the longest. And the reason, among a few, was community. So talk to any elderly person that moves and gets exercise, and then have them have their resources and their family and their active communities taken away from them. Of course it takes a toll. So I have multiple studies to back it up, but really it's common sense, which people just don't have anymore. You can't treat people like this.
I wanted to move on to, I think you gave a really good explanation. I watched almost the whole thing of your live stream about the WHO. I believe it's called Who Started the Who, which of course is a very clever title. You should trademark that. Let's play a clip from that, and then I want to talk more about the origins of the WHO.
You can't stop somebody from seeing their family in the hospital. Why isn't Ron DeSantis saying that? Why isn't Trump saying? Because they don't really give a crap, guys. They're just putting on a show for you. Yeah, they're way better. DeSantis is better than anyone else, and I'm grateful for him. And even Governor Abbott, he's a little sneaky, but I like the fact that they're allowing more freedom. That's what America's about. But I'm just blown away by the fact none of them will talk about the testing. If you're not talking about the testing, what are you talking about? The tests are not FDA approved for this either. They're emergency use authorized.
Now you talk about the emergency use authorization. I saw you interviewed Chris Sky. I imagine a lot of that was about that sort of thing. For those who don't know, they have to go through an emergency process to approve the vaccine, especially, stop me if I say anything wrong, by the way, mRNA vaccine, because it's never been used before. They've been studying it for 20 plus years, but they've never used it. They use this emergency certification or approval process when they don't have enough time to say something's safe and to push it out like they've done with this vaccine. I think they've done it with a few other things. I can't name them, but that's my understanding of it. So I wanted to ask you, where does this connection come from? What is connected to the WHO? And I want you to give, because I think you were good at explaining it, a brief background of where the World Health Organization comes from and what its origins were. Because to my understanding, like NASA, it's not exactly a picture-perfect origin story.
Yeah, well, NASA, yeah, I guess it was Werner von Braun, a Nazi who kind of helped run that whole show. But
you can't say that. Banned.
Yeah,
banned immediately.
No, I mean, it's a history. But with the emergency use authorization, so, FDA approval is when they go through everything, and it usually takes like 4 years minimum. And they didn't have 4 years, and they're lying to people. I fact-checked Jen Psaki, who's the press secretary speaking on behalf of Joe Biden, huge role. She lied about that unapologetically. Get it? It's FDA. It's not FDA approved. It's emergency use authorized, which means, yeah, just get this out because it's crazy. And the reason Trump stopped talking about these other side drugs was because in the clause of doing emergency use authorization, if there's another drug available that works, you can emergency use authorize it because it's usually considered like last ditch. It's not necessarily the first thing, like only if there's no other option. So they had to quash every other option to push out their product. So, it's worth knowing because everybody's lying about it, and it's just worth considering. There's no conspiracy there. That's just the truth. And the real conspiracy is the fact that our politicians and health experts are going on television and lying to your face about that. That should make people suspicious, regardless of or at least besides, the history of some other stuff some of these companies have done, including one of the companies, not the mRNA shot, but the Johnson & Johnson. They're currently in court under a baby powder lawsuit where even Reuters, which is mainstream, reported that they knew that there's asbestos in their baby powder causing all sorts of problems. And, Pfizer's been settled out in court for bribery and in situations where they were manipulating data. This is all like justicedepartment.gov. So it's not crazy to want your autonomy to not be forced into this thing that's not approved yet. It's ridiculous what they're doing. And the World Health Organization was founded in San Francisco after World War II when the United States helped, the Soviet Union. And it was with a few countries, I think it was France, UK, United States, Soviet Union, and China. So if people are wondering, and they use the word communist a lot, like, is this feeling like communism? It was started with essentially communist China and communist Russia. When we did the World Health Organization and settled this little deal with Russia, Stalin was the leader, and Mao Zedong was either at the head of China or at the head of his party and assuming power at that point. So they seem communist because they started with communist roots, and I don't know that they've ever changed their philosophy, because I also have somewhere around here the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. I've read it, and in it he wants total power of banking, media, transportation, and you can't go here, but we're going to tax you per mile, says Pete Buttigieg in the Biden administration. This is all textbook communism. So they've kind of leveraged their power, and that's their origins. That's where they started. It's just history. So I think people, if they were aware and educated, they would not be so compliant and submissive.
Yeah, I think you can see a lot of the blueprints of a lot of these plans enacting over the world. I mean, 5 years ago, I think the word globalism was attempted to be smeared as an anti-Semitic thing. We got past that, and now we're at the point where I think everybody's wondering who may or may not be calling the shots. Because like we talked about earlier, there's some sort of shadow behind some conservative parties that I'll be completely honest, I don't know who it is that says don't talk about this stuff. And best case scenario, I think you have to believe that these people just don't care. They just like the money, they like the privilege, the power, and therefore they're not going to risk anything to lose it. They're not. Why say something that's not going to get you a lot of favor with people and might get you fired? So I'm hoping, it's a sad hope to have, that that's the best case scenario. But on the other hand, you have to imagine if there is, whether it's a group of corporate hedge fund leaders or something like that calling the shots, the Bilderbergs, if you want to go down that route, I'd have to hope, or I'd have to imagine that might be a possibility. But we're going to say goodbye to our YouTube audience. We're going to move behind the paywall, an extra layer of free speech. So if you guys want to see the rest of the interview, and I know you do, go to rebelnewsplus.com. You can sign up for $8 a month or $80 a year. That's rebelnewsplus.com. And we're going to talk about some of your highlights from a couple years ago, which I mentioned off the top. We're going to talk about Alex Jones at the border, and we're going to ask your favorite influencers. So rebelnews.com/Andrew_says, everybody. Thank you for watching Andrew Says. If you want to see the full uncut version, go to rebelnewsplus.com and sign up today so you can see the entire episode where we talk about topics we can't show you on YouTube. They'll ban us.